everyone. My name is Reem Noor. I'm a social protection specialist with the ILO Social Protection Department based in Geneva. And I have with me a number of colleagues from GIZ, from BMZ, from the ILO, as well as colleagues from from other development partners. It is my pleasure today to share with you this experience on an ongoing collaboration with GIZ and BMZ and share the experiences from the implementation in Rwanda. So today, to kick us off, we have the pleasure of having Mrs. Sarah Stadler, who is the Senior Policy Officer in the Decent Work Unit with BMZ. And Sarah, or rather BMZ, is the commissioning of the Jobs Initiative. And we have here, I think, today many of the colleagues from the job initiatives working with GIZ. We also have enterprises who have collaborated with the Jobs Initiative. And so, Sarah, over to you for your introductory remarks. And thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for this nice introduction and handover. I'd like to start by extending a really warm welcome to everyone who participated in this webinar today. Hello to all the ILO and GIZ colleagues, the social partners, the enterprise leaders, and all the other people involved in this project and interested in its progress. I'll start just by giving a little bit of context as to how this project came about and what its position also is in the context of the Special Initiative for Decent Work for a Just Transition and the overall BMZ agenda for decent work worldwide. The letter was launched last year, only in autumn, when I first joined the Decent Work unit, and it defines 7 key focus areas that kind of serve as our guideline in terms of orienting the focus and efforts of our German Development Corporation in the field of decent work. And it places a strong emphasis also on the topic of just transition. Why? Because we believe that both decent work and just transition are key levers for improving the working conditions and for ensuring sustainable economic development in our partner countries, and also for contributing to a just transition. And we understand decent work and social protection to also reinforce each other positively in many ways. And that is the reason why successively, ever since the launch of the Agenda for Decent Work, we have reoriented the Special Initiative Decent Work for Just Transition towards that focus area to see how can synergies be created between these 2 important fields, and how can we work together with key actors such as the ILO in this field in order to develop innovative new approaches, how to cater to the needs of the companies, while at the same time also ensuring that working conditions are fair and decent, that social protection is extended to a larger number of workers, and to benefit a larger number of people in that field. Now, in this context, this really great initiative came about with the goal of developing very hands-on, grassroots level kind of approaches, and as it can be called, those prototypes for how to connect these 2 topics, decent work and social protection, and what can companies do in order to extend the social protection coverage to their workers, as well as other workers that are thus far not yet covered by these approaches. And I'm really happy that so many interesting approaches came about by this long-term process. And I'm very excited to hear about them today, because I really feel that they will give a good incentive and impulse also in terms of potential scale-up and larger effects, possibly also in the context of the Global Accelerator, the VN Global Accelerator on jobs and social protection for just transition, which is a larger multilateral initiative that we are also working on very closely in partnership with ILO. And I'm very happy to hear about especially 2 key prototypes today, and to get into the topic of the different learnings and lessons learned that we and all partners involved in this project have gained in the process, and to see how we can use these moving forward. With that, I would hand back to you, and I wish everybody a great workshop.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thanks for these introductory comments. We really appreciated the collaboration. We thought we would showcase the project video before starting with the actual webinar content. So Andrea, if you could project that.
Special initiative Decent Work for Just Transition, we work directly with the private sector, so we have a very demand-oriented, needs-based approach together with companies to create good jobs. And in that regard, as we're talking about good jobs, decent work, the topic of social protection is super important. And so we were looking for an approach to focus on social protection in our work, but also keep our logic of intervention and working directly with the private sector, because we see a great potential and opportunity to involve companies, to involve the private sector in the aims to make sure social protection is rolled out to as many people as possible.
I liked how different it was from the ones that I'm usually, attending. It made us, easier to follow, taught us, how to work as a team, and also we networked even during those group activities because not all of us knew each other. We are engaging with dairy farmers on a daily basis. So anything that would help so that we strengthen that social protection, so that we are in a win-win position where we're not just getting milk, but we don't care about them. So in a way that they are also winning, not just money-wise, but benefiting from the company.
Being in the workshop, trying to brainstorm and trying to see areas of improvement, I thought about self-agents that we are now recruiting more and more, and also the way we don't incorporate them in our payroll as those we contribute for. So I ended up finding out something new that we can do to improve our social protection contribution. Doing this, we want also to mobilize other enterprises to enroll their sales agents, because in Rwanda we have more than 500,000 sales agents that are there working like that, not registered in any social protection scheme.
La protection sociale, pour nous, elle fait partie intégrante de notre vision du travail. Lorsque nous avons délocalisé une partie de la production ici au Rwanda, elle faisait déjà partie du plan financier. Nous avons commencé avec plus ou moins 1000 employés, et en 4 ans, nous sommes à 5300 employés, et tous les employés, absolument tous, sont déclarés. Donc c'est quelque chose, c'est pas une question qu'on s'est posée. Pour nous, ça allait de soi, qu'on est venu s'installer ici, qu'il fallait offrir une couverture sociale à tous les employés.
The childcare for me, out of everything, is the most important, because it's again that young workforce that will be after. So let's take care of them from the beginning. That's really the future of the country. So if you can get business to contribute indirectly to that part as well while making profit. It's important the making profit, because without profit, which is part of the Sustainability Pact, all these will just remain a beautiful story. If we take care of our workers, they will take care of your product. If your products are well made, they will take care of your customer. Your customer will buy more.
Thank you very much. So that was a very quick summary of the project. And with that, I think so the idea now from the webinar is to have a more thorough overview of the project design. We will hear from Julia Kuhn on this, how the project came to be. We will also hear from Aurélie Klein, who's the project manager in Rwanda in terms of the implementation at the Rwanda level. We will also hear from the Rwanda Social Security Board on the experience from the government perspective and why this is important for the government. We will also hear from Blandine, who is the CEO that was highlighted in the video from the enterprise perspective, and sort of how was the experience for the enterprises during this workshop and during its implementation. And last but not least, we will hear also from an ILO discussant how this is important for the work that we do as an organization in terms of decent work and the extension of social protection coverage in general. So with that, I give the floor to Mrs. Julia Kuhn, who is from the GIZ Global Program on Decent Work for a Just Transition, who will give us a bit on the background of the project, on the JOBS initiative, as well as on the project approach. Julia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rim. And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. And I will share my screen with you. And while doing that, a few words about myself. As Rim mentioned, I am part of the global program Decent Work for a Just Transition within GIZ, and there I work for the innovation component, and this program is part of the special initiative Decent Work for a Just Transition, or also called Invest for Jobs. I'm very happy that so many of you joined us, and I will have the job today, as Rim said, to give you a little bit of information about the reasoning, a bit more information about the context and the approach that we embarked on with ILO in this project. But as some of you might not be so familiar with the special initiative, let me give you some brief information about our mandate and our activities. The special initiative has been operating since 2018, 2019, and within the special initiative, a number of implementing organizations, GIZ is one of them, works together with and in 8 African partner countries all across the continent, with the development objective of creating up to 100,000 good jobs in those partner countries in direct cooperation with companies mainly. And within the scope of this overarching objective of job creation, we also aim to contribute to a number of additional goals, as you can see here. Let me focus on 2 of them. We really try to be a flexible and effective, fast vehicle for the operationalization of political priorities, such as the Just Transition, as was mentioned by Sarah Stadler before. And we do that by contributing to the socio-ecological transformation of the economy, and also to the feminist development policy by creating more and better jobs, especially for women. And last but not least, and that brings me also to the project that we're speaking about today, we also aim to improve local working conditions and social protection in the partner countries. As was mentioned before, the special initiative implements a micro level, a needs-oriented private sector cooperation approach. That means we work directly on the enterprise level together with enterprises in creating these jobs. It's fair enough to say, I think, that within the last years, the Special Initiative managed to build quite a large and reliable partner network that helps us tremendously to reach our goals. And we're always looking for new partners. So if you think that your organization, your mandate fits the topics that you have seen that we will be speaking about today, please reach out. We're always happy to build new strategic alliances in order to increase and maximize the impact that we create.
Sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah.
Sorry, do you mind widening your screen? I think you're not sharing the right.
What am I sharing? Because I am not able to see what you're seeing.
The full screen is not working, Julia. Maybe Andrea can take over if possible.
That's weird. It was working before. My apologies. Let me try a different approach to the full screen. So you are seeing the part my slides and part the slide that I'm presenting. Is that correct?
We see slide number 2 now.
Yes.
Yeah, that is correct. But you see it large enough?
Not in full mode.
That is weird. Andrea, if you have it there, then you could take over because the full screen seems to not be working. My apologies.
No problem. You just have to stop sharing your screen.
Yes,
and
I will
step in.
Stop the sharing.
Thank you. Fantastic.
And you could immediately go to the third page.
Yep. Let me is this better?
Yeah, but please, that would be perfect. And the third one further, please.
Okay.
Because if I may take you now to the year of 2022, which is not that long ago, but at that point, the focus on social protection that was mentioned before was not yet actually a formulated target to kind of follow our activities within the Special Initiative. Nevertheless, we within GIZ thought, okay, there is great potential to increasingly include this topic into our activities, because for us, it was a logical consequence within the development of the Special Initiative to create increasingly jobs of higher quality with better working conditions to approach also the topic of social protection. And with that, we went to the colleagues from ILO, from the Social Protection Department, and they are the experts for social protection. They're the experts for the extension of social protection coverage. And we were really happy and still are very grateful that the team around RIM and Valerie Schmidt was actually willing to come on board and embark with us on this journey of, you could say it was also a journey of experimentation and piloting. More about that in a little bit. And I can say that the complementarity of these two organizations, one operating in a tripartite structure and one working on the micro level, as mentioned before, really allowed each organization to bring in their individual strengths and by that create something unique at this interface between employment promotion and social protection. And I think with that, we already have one of the success factors of this project. And next slide, please. We did build together a multi-phase project architecture with in the center the objective of developing and actually in reality testing, piloting ideas. We called them prototypes on the enterprise level. I will not go into detail of the different phases and the prototypes now because my colleagues from ILO will do that in a moment. but I wanted to show you how we incrementally built this project and its outputs one phase after the other, with the main focus lying in the piloting of the prototypes, which, as was mentioned before, is still ongoing. There are still final activities being undertaken until the end of the month in our partner country, Rwanda. And I think this is also the point where we could, or I would like to really thank the colleagues of ILO Rwanda, but also the colleagues from the special initiative from the country program in Rwanda from GIZ, who have been a tremendous support in the implementation phase, especially of this project. Thank you very much for your work and your efforts at this point. And yes, next slide, please. Allow me now to go a little bit more into detail of the what or the why, and after that of the how of our intervention. As mentioned, we saw great potential in creating synergies between social protection as a topic which is normally being approached by national policymaker, by a macro level approach, and on the other side, the demand-oriented approach that we in the special initiative have to work directly with companies. And from that, I think we can say that we strove to create impact in 3 dimensions. First of all, we wanted to increase awareness and knowledge among the private sector, among private sector companies about, on one side, the rights and responsibility in regard to social protection, but more than that, the opportunities which actually exist for private sector companies to play an important role in the strengthening of social protection. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we also wanted to increase visibility and attention among institutions, among authorities and organizations for this potential, for the important role of companies of the private sector as partners in strengthening social protection. And we wanted to do that in a way that we thought, why not showcase successful good examples? And with that, I come to the 3rd dimension, which is actually also the starting point of the project. And that is, we really wanted to build a blueprint and a piloting approach to enhance social protection coverage in reality through concrete practice-oriented activities on the enterprise level. Next slide, please. How did we do that? We decided very early on that we wanted to engage in a bottom-up approach through all phases of the project. And for us, that also meant that we were developing a series of co-creation workshops in which all relevant stakeholders played an active role. Everyone was participating actively, with the starting point being the perspective, the level of the enterprises and the real life business contexts. And I believe that this methodology, as we have taken it on, is yet another success factor of this project, because it really enabled the development of ideas that firstly respond to real drivers and constraints of the private sector, that secondly were actually feasible to be tested in practice within the short time frame of the project, and thirdly were still guided by the international social security standards. Next slide, please. And now, and that's my final slide, and with that I will give back to you, Rim. I wanted to build on the previously mentioned success factors with some learning experiences that we have made during the process, and more will certainly follow by my colleagues. But first of all, let me speak about the enterprise role. We were really happy during the process to see that this theory that the enterprise role within social protection is actually a super important one, and that has great potential. That theory, we were able to confirm that. That is positive. On the other side, we also saw that in the end, the role of the enterprises is structurally still underestimated, one could say, maybe even underdeveloped. So we still see a lot of potential to go deeper into that, which also means acknowledging anticipating and also, of course, mitigating, especially the discrepancy between theory and practice. So the real life business reality of workers and enterprises on one side, and the framework of social security systems on the other side, in order to altogether reach our aim to create access to social protection for all. For us, that means maybe one little appeal here, take into consideration the private sector perspective, bring them to the table, and also give them a seat and consider their very valuable input when discussing things that have an effect on them. The second learning for us concerns the bottom-up co-creation process. Here, I think it was very clear for us that this way forward allowed us to really develop ideas that had relevance in practice. And by that also we were able to maximize the commitment and the buy-in of all stakeholders involved. So here, cooperation with all stakeholders, and sometimes their interests and objectives naturally might not be the same. To really make sure that is managed well is also one learning of this project, I think. And also connected to that, and we were really happy that everyone was very open to this. We learned that this willingness, this curiosity to engage in innovative and experimental approaches. I mean, we had a clear objective with this project, but nevertheless, we were very results open. So we had no idea what the prototypes would be looking like in the beginning. And that was really a vital factor also for the project. And I would like to hand back to you, Rim, with this last remark regarding the scaling potential, because we really think that there is potential for the scaling on one side of the approach itself, but also of some of the prototypes. And here you will learn more about this from my colleagues now. But if you feel that there is a connection or there's something that resonates with you from what we are talking about, then please get in contact. And for us, for example, as was mentioned by Sarah Stadler before also, we do see quite a big linkage to the UN Global Accelerator for Jobs and Social Protection for a Just Transition. And we really hope that some of the learning experiences that we were able to be making during our project might serve as a blueprint for private sector involvement in this larger initiative. And with that, I thank you, and back to you, Rim.
Thank you very much, Julie, for this very comprehensive overview and for also highlighting sort of GIZ and the Jobs Initiative perspective on this project. As you were saying, between the two organizations, we looked for the common entry points and the common interests in moving this forward and ultimately extending social protection coverage to workers. And with that, I'll call on Aurélie Klein, who is our ILO social protection manager based in Rwanda and who was managing the project implementation in Rwanda. Aurélie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rim. And yes, I totally agree with Julia that it was a very exciting journey, and that we also, I think, quite happy about what we managed to achieve, even if it's still in a prototype level, and hopefully the scaling up will be coming later. Before going more into detail of the prototypes, I would also want to come back why this is important from the ILO side. And I think many of you probably know the ILO approach to social protection, which of course we see as a human right. And I think it was also mentioned by Sarah in the opening remarks that the ultimate objective is really to realize this human right for the whole population. Given that it's a human right, there's also the primary responsibility of the states, and international experience has shown that national systems that are combining diversity of approaches are the most successful in providing this. So those diversity can include, of course, social assistance schemes, but then also very importantly, the employment-based social protection schemes. And where Julia has rightly mentioned that there's a strong involvement, responsibility, but also important role of the employers. having those different schemes coming together also allows us to have like a larger pooling, to have some redistribution between those who have the luck of having a better income and those who might not be so lucky, and then also have the solidarity in financing. It's also important that if we consider social protection as a human right, that it's really going to national systems, because nevertheless, how important the role of employers, a national system will also be more resilient than an enterprise that might financially struggle. And then if social protection is only linked to the employment and enterprise, that might put at risk the coverage. So therefore, very important. Also, I think important to mention that there isn't a business case for social protection. Julia has also mentioned it in her presentation, but a workforce that is healthy and that is protected is better performing. It's more predictable if you pay a social security contribution on a monthly basis than if you would have to deal with the cost of an employment injury, for example. And also during times of crisis, especially COVID, social protection has actually shown that it can provide continuity. We still have a lot of coverage gaps, and actually the 3 dots that you saw in the middle, it's not just decoration, but it represents the population that, or the share of population that is covered in Rwanda by different schemes. So the pink dot is the share of the population that is covered by the Rwanda Social Security Board mandatory schemes, which provide the highest protection in Rwanda. They are employment-based, so a very important role of the employers, and they include pension, maternity, and employment injury coverage. The blue dot represents the population that is covered by social assistance, and we wouldn't expect the budget for social assistance or the coverage of social assistance to dramatically increase over the coming years. So if you want to decrease the yellow circle of the missing middle, we would really have to increase the people covered within the pink circle and the RSSB mandatory schemes. And so that's also the approach that came out from the prototypes. And it was really also an intentional approach to focus on those mandatory schemes because they have a strong role for employers, but then also provide the highest protection. So there was a process of different workshops to come up with prototypes, and actually those then led to 3 specific prototypes in the context of Rwanda. The first one was driven by Burera Dairy, so a dairy company that sources its milk from milk farmers that are organized in a cooperative. And the business or the objective of Burera Dairy was, of course, to provide better protection for the farmers they are working with, but also to encourage better loyalty in providing them with the milk. The second prototype is driven by Cosmotive, and Blondin for sure will say more about that later. So Cosmotive is producing reusable sanitary pads that then are distributed to a network of sales agents. And again, while Cosmotive, of course, for their permanent staff is providing all the social security benefits, also wanted to extend that to the sales agents, but at the same time also have a constructive business case around being as an employer more attractive to the sales agents. The last prototype that came out from the workshop then in Rwanda is around covering motorcycle drivers that are organized in a cooperative, and where then there would be an expected role for the cooperative or for the app that they are using to extend social security coverage to the drivers. We then went, after having the blueprint for the prototypes, to an implementation phase where we were really thinking through the different steps that we would have to take for being able to implement them. And I think there were basically 3 make or break points for the prototypes to be taken forward and to actually make it to the implementation phase. The first one was thinking about who can play which roles and who are actually the different actors that are important for being able to implement it. Both for the farmers in the prototype and the sales agents prototype, Burera Dairy and Cosmotive were clearly very committed. They accepted or were very engaged in the process, also accepted within their corporate social responsibility to be able to cover the employer share of the contributions that would have to be paid. Also, there was a Cosmotive or the cooperative that would be involved in paying either the farmers or the sales agents. So it was also very clear who could play a role in registering the new, let's say, employees or the beneficiaries of the prototype. And it was also quite clear what would be the basis for assessing the contribution that would have to be paid. This was not the case for the motorcycle prototype, where the cooperative didn't really play this role yet for their members, and also the app would only be accountable for part of the salary or the revenue that they receive. They would have multiple sources, and that also led to, was one of the reasons why we decided that this prototype might come at a later stage and that we would really focus on the two assets for taking that forward. A second point that is very important was actually thinking about what does it exactly mean if we are now applying those social security schemes to those workers. So for example, we would have for employment injury, we would have to define a workplace. We would have to make sure that it is also aligned with other taxation rules, or what would it mean if those people would come from a company tax into an income tax. So that's also a process that is still ongoing to also make sure that from the legal side and taxation side, everything is fine. And then the last point was, of course, the consultation with the beneficiaries. So we had consultations with the sales agents, as well as with the farmers, and I think RSSB mostly, and of course the companies made a great job in convincing them. So we had, because we wanted also to have a voluntary aspect of it. So 2/3 of the sales agents signed up to the initiative, being willing to pay the contributions and then be covered. And actually all of the farmers expressed their interest. So given that the sales network of Cosmotive is still limited, so we are now at about registering around 10 sales agents for this prototype. And we hope that also once the legal aspects are clear, we would also be able to register the around 70 milk farmers that have been participating in the other prototype. I think on the lessons learned, Julia has already mentioned several of them. So of course, also for us, the participatory and co-creation approach was very important. It's also very much linked to, I think, the ILO role and promotion of social dialogue. So I think therefore we're very happy that this actually proved that bringing everybody on the table really contributed to the success, and both employers and beneficiaries being interested in participating. Of course, we're also happy about the complementary partnership. And just to mention, I think from my side, also a big thanks to the companies, but also especially to the colleagues from Rwanda Social Security Board. I think Dr. Regis will say more about it, but also to his team, a big thanks for being so flexible and also really engaging in this process and really being committed in finding innovative approaches. I think I will stop there in the interest of time, but happy to answer any other questions during the discussion. Back to you, Rim.
Thank you very much, Aurélie, for the comprehensive overview on the implementation at the Rwanda level. Just to mention that initially at the global level, there were 3 countries involved: Senegal, Rwanda, and Morocco, and that we selected for several reasons, mostly operational reasons, Rwanda for implementation. But I really do second Aurélie in thanking the Rwanda Social Security Board, who were involved from the beginning and who are really committed to moving this approach forward. And with that, I call on Mr. Regis Hitamana, who is the Chief Benefits Officer at the Rwanda Social Security Board, to give an overview or his views on this approach, on how this is linked with the National Social Security Board's priorities, including in terms of extending social security or social protection to workers in the informal economy and workers in non-standard types of employment. Mr. Hitamana, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm happy to be here, and I was also privileged to be part of this great initiative. at RSSB, as we are administrating social security products, different products, this was an opportunity for us to actually explore what is possible, because we are undergoing a number of reforms and we wanted to test what is possible and maybe adjust even our structure and our way of working to initiatives that are to be able to respond to the needs of potential members. You would, as a country, although we are still a low-income country, we are growing fast, and given also the advance in the impact of the health policies, Rwandans are likely to survive longer, and they need protection when they retire. But also, this growing middle-income group, I think, is in need of this kind of safety net. So we, as already said, I think she did very well with image. We have very big missing middle that we need to address. And as always, when you have a big plate full of food, you are always challenged on where to start from. So this kind of initiative allowed us to segment the informal sector workers and think critically about who are they, what are their characteristics, what are their ways of earning income, and how can we integrate social protection into their everyday work. So initially, the social security laws that we have are usually designed for the enterprise that are within formal and within employer and employee relationship. Sometimes the kind of relationship that were not defined the way like you understand for the formal worker was difficult, but we tried to manage within the existing legal framework what is allowed and what is possible. We came up with, as already said, with a number of prototypes that we tried. So we realized actually there is huge potential to reach to the informal sector. We just need, we should not wait for them to adjust to us, but we should adjust to them. And we can only do it if we understand how they work. But also we realized that prototypes are offering opportunities for reaching to the informal sector, but it's not every informal sector that will not be reached if we don't change our legal framework. So we identified sectors that are very close to formal and worked with them, but we also acknowledge that there are those that would want some legal framework to change in order to be reached. So it requires a lot of engagement with employers and employees. And from our experience, it shows that there is both demand for cover and as opposed to what one might think that employers would want not to spend more on wages, actually they are also eager to support their employees. They are interested in wellness of their staff currently and in the future. So I think it's a matter of us reaching out to them, and we realize that we need a comprehensive behavior change communication strategy that will allow us to give them the right message to the right audience in order for them to show that there are opportunities of joining social security, as opposed to how it has been branded as it is for the office people. Prototypes gave us, opened our eyes of what is possible. So the sectors we selected, they're actually, as the name says, these are prototypes. There is opportunity of scale. If I give the example of the agents, I think we have a big number of companies that are using agents to provide services, to deliver products, and we are already reaching out to some of them. And every company we talk to, they were waiting for us. So this has been really an eye opener. Lastly, I think the ambition is very high for the country and for the Rwanda Social Security Board. The recently released the National Development Strategy expects creation of 250,000 jobs, decent jobs, and it's also a challenge for us to, for the country to make them decent jobs, but also for us to adjust our systems and laws to be able to capture them into the social security, hopefully to reduce the size of the yellow box, the yellow cycle that already was showing. So I think there are opportunities. It doesn't require huge budgets. I think if we strengthen and reach out to our SMEs, to our small companies, to cooperatives, why not? I think if investments are directed to the right sectors and our social security systems adjusted to their specific needs, I think there is potential for scale. And we also welcome collaborations to not only expand this initiative, but also to explore, because this is just scratching the surface. The cycle is very big, and it's not homogeneous. There are different groups in the cycle, so we need to keep exploring. But also, we can also pledge that at RSSB, as we are this came when we are restructuring the institution, we're also thinking of setting up actually a unit that is responsible for identifying the informal sector and reaching out to them and bringing any reform that is required in the social security in order to increase, to expand the coverage. That's what I can say, and I thank you all for the collaboration and for the audience of today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hitimana. I think those were very encouraging words in terms of both the achievements so far and the potential for scale up and the continued collaboration to extend social protection coverage to the missing middle. And with that, I give the floor to Mrs. Blandine Umuzira Nenge. My apologies if I'm mispronouncing your last name. She is the founder and CEO of Cosmotive, which is a social enterprise focusing on women's health, sanitary and menstrual products. Blandine was part of the, I believe, the co-creation workshops, both at the global and the national levels, and is one of the enterprises that are leading on this process. Blandine, over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Rim. My name is Blandine Umuzira Nenge. I'm the founder of Cosmotive, as mentioned before. Basically, I can start with some of the things that we covered from the co-creation workshop first. It was a good time, like, for us to look at what we do. We thought we were doing enough because we were contributing for every one of our employees, and if I can call, like, the ones that we call employees, the ones that working formally or fitting in the framework that exists already. And the workshop was a good time, to challenge ourselves to do better, to see if we can do something new or something different from what we were doing. And this was just challenging ourselves, is there anyone we are working with that we can actually extend the social protection contribution to? That's how we thought about why not including our sales agents, though it has been looked at as people are not part of the company for so long. But from our side, starting to work with them, what we saw was that them looking at another care from the employer, they are also willing to give more of their time, more of their effort to bring profit to the company. So that was our hypothesis when we started, and it proved when we had the workshop recently with some of them who started. It was more of showing them what we agreed with ILO, GIZ, and RSSB, but also allowing them the room to listen to what we are proposing, to work with them, but them also contributing to what they think they can do. And one of my key takeaway has been when we develop any framework with the people that it will be benefiting, it's easier for them to to uptake that proposal, because like in the beginning, 45% of them they agreed to register for this social protection contribution because they were able to get all the information they needed to know about what's included, what's the benefit of them contributing for their social protection, what's the advantage, and everything that is beyond what they have been getting as just commissions. And apart from that, we saw that their commitment or their involvement changed when they had that there is another benefit that can happen. And as for any other company, me as an employer, I think the first thing that come to mind, or one of the questions they were asking in the workshop in the beginning, it was kind of when you hear about social protection contribution, what do you think about expense or benefits? So most of on the side of employers, it was more about I see expense. On the side of employees, it was more about benefit. So to other employers out there, I think what I saw more from just looking at these contributions as a cost, it has been also another thing of motivation to the other side of the company, because the sales agents are really bigger player of our cash flow than we even are, than our production unit is. So when we motivate them, when we include them and care about them, they are free to give, they are free to work, and they are also motivated to do more than what they have been doing, because they are just they are seeing more than money. So it was really beneficial to have everyone sharing all the benefits, everything to them in the beginning, and also them passing the information to the other ones they met, because it wasn't only by the workshop, they also shared with other new sales agents that we are recruiting, because we are still recruiting them. And yeah, it's mainly what I found out, not only thinking about the cost, but also on the benefit behind and on the loyalty that the agents bring on the table when they feel like they are part of the company that way. I think that's mainly what I will share by now, and I'm open to respond to any question after. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Blondine. Thank you both for your thoughts, but also for being part of this exciting initiative in Rwanda. I see already there are some questions in the chat, but maybe before moving to the Q&A session, we thought we would give the floor to Mrs. Céline Perron-Bista, who is our Senior Social Protection and Employment Specialist here at the ILO, to sort of take us from this experience and from this approach to more general overview in terms of reflections on the extension of social protection to workers in all forms of employment. So both for employees who have a formal relationship with their employers, but also all the others. Céline, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rim. And thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this very, very interesting discussion. I'm coming, I realize, at a very late stage of this project, but nevertheless, it's really encouraging to see on the work and achievement that have been done through this project. I also realize that I'm here between you, Rim, and the Q&A, so I will be very brief to also give an opportunity for maybe people to react and ask more questions. Maybe some key messages and some thought. I was taking notes at the same time I was listening to the presentation. Maybe also some thoughts for upscaling this kind of initiative and maybe replication in Rwanda and in other countries. One message is I've taken from Mr. Timana from the Rwanda Social Security Board, and first really congratulations, sir, on the result, but also the ambition you have set for the country to extend social protection is extremely encouraging. And I'm really pleased to hear the strong link you're making in the country on between the extension, the objective of extension of social protection, but also with the formalization of the enterprises and the development of decent work. I think this is a very interesting approach, this integration, and probably the most successful approach we have seen so far also in other countries to look at this three dimension. What I've also listened through the presentation is a very strong involvement of the social partners in this project, but also in the extension of social protection in the country. And this, indeed, as Aurélie said, it's been always at the really core of the international labor standards, this engagement of social partners. Not only in the implementation, as maybe it was more the focus of this project, but it's also important in the design of the measure and the different schemes of social protection to have also the voice of the social partners heard, including in the financing of these different schemes, but as well as the monitoring. If I hear well on the different intervention, I see that today this webinar enters more into a phase of now taking stock of what has been learned, monitoring the progress and seeing how we can continue improving. And this is really encouraging to see that the social partner will still be at the core of this process. Indeed, the project had a focus on working with the employers a lot for extending social protection, and that is a good approach because it's also through the employers that progress towards formalization will happen, as well as also to progress towards decent work. So this approach of including the employers, the enterprises is indeed very important for formalizing the jobs, because we all know that social security can only achieve so much in terms of improving the working condition and access to social protection. But if there's no effort of formalization of both enterprises and employment, this extension will be limited in scope. Yeah. Also, maybe something else I wanted to mention, because some of the experiences and the concrete experience I was hearing from you, Blandine, from your enterprise, as well as the other experiences we saw in the video, resonated with me also with the role of the actors of the social and solidarity economy. I don't know if it was part of the project, but I think this is also a good avenue to explore for the extension of decent work on social protection. And recently, in 2022, the International Labour Conference adopted a resolution on the role of this social and solidarity and the role of the social partners to promote the social and solidarity economy, and including the social protection. So that was a small parenthesis. And maybe now, just to conclude, maybe 4 thoughts I would like to share with you on how we can build on the results of this project to upscaling, including in Rwanda, but also maybe bring some of the consideration to other countries. The one key message that I've heard this afternoon, which is very important, is indeed to work with the social partners including the employers, to really help to strengthen the social protection system, the national social protection system. It was in all the presentation, and I think this is the very important approach is to continue strengthening the existing system. They are not all perfect, and I'm sure also in Rwanda, Mr. Etimana, you will agree that there's always scope for improvement and reaching out to more enterprises and workers. But nevertheless, they are built on the international principle of social security, so they have a good foundation and a good value, and those systems will always be more effective than implementing separate schemes or separate program directly through the enterprises, or also calling upon the commercial and the private insurance to step in lieu of this national social protection system. So this is the first message. The second one, the social insurance exists yet, and I mean Rwanda, but as well as many other countries. And we're all aware that there's still some scope for improvement from extending the legal coverage, for example. But I think also what I've learned from the experiences of this project is also the innovation and the creativity that can be brought to simplifying the administration, the procedure, to make this social insurance system more accessible for the enterprises, and in particular the small and medium enterprises. And here I would like to share the example of Senegal that will probably resonate with what you've done through this project, where they implemented what they call the small, the schemes for the small contributors, so the small and medium enterprises. It's not a separate scheme, but it's rather a simplification of the administrative procedure and specific procedure that are adapted to the small and medium enterprises. So here really the idea is to keep all the enterprises and workers under the same general schemes, but to look at how we can have special or specific arrangement so the scheme is also more accessible for all the enterprises and all the workers. And I think this is another important message that we've heard this afternoon. In particular, what also I liked about this project in terms of approach is I've never heard words of sanction, of more punitive approach, but more really of creating incentives for enterprises to register their workers into social insurance. And this is a very valuable approach that will probably bring fruits as well. And together with this incentive, also the link, I think it was in your presentation, Aurélie, with a package of services for the small enterprises to also help them, rather than punish them, but to also help them to formalize and to register to social insurance, including counseling or helping them with skills development to improve their productivity. And I think that was a very positive message I've heard from this project, really, and listening to the challenges of the small enterprises and supporting them rather than forcing some implementation of regulation that sometimes can also put the enterprise itself in a difficult situation. And then, sorry for being long, my last message. I think it's important also when we work with different partners that we work also with the social partners, the workers and the employers that have been recognized in the country and are also engaged in national dialogue, in social dialogue, and also in international discussion. For instance, they will have some leverage power to work also with the Tripartite Council of the Rwanda Social Security Board, so to help also disseminating the good practices of this project in Rwanda, but also those organizations that are exposed and engaged in regional and international debates, so they can also continue disseminating the results, sharing and learning from other experiences to bring to Rwanda. And here I'm also thinking of the constituents of the International Labour Organization that are participating on this also regional and international fora to continue this exchange of experiences and South-South cooperation, as it was mentioned at the beginning. But thanks again for inviting me and for this very, very interesting exchange this afternoon. Thank you. Over to you, Rim.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for these important thoughts and for the really opening up the scope, I guess, of this approach and the potential for a scale up in other contexts. In the interest of time, I think we will open for discussions. I see there are a lot of questions already in the chat. I don't know if any of the colleagues would like to come in person right now, or whether you would like me to direct some of the questions to the colleagues on the panel. Are there hands raised? Sorry, am I seeing anything? If not, maybe Aurélie or Régis, would you like to come in on the first question in the chat, which is how are informal workers included in the implementation in Rwanda?
I can come in and then Régis can complement if I've said anything wrong. Maybe I can also, because I think most of the questions are actually more around the implementation of the prototypes, so maybe I can just provide a few more clarifications. I think as was also mentioned by Dr. Régis, it's more, I think, of course, it's informal workers. The definition of informal workers is always a little complicated because it might include several elements. So I think in this case, it's workers that are not covered yet by Social Security, or I think especially in the context of Rwanda, and I think this was also mentioned, and there's another question on that. The coverage of social health insurance is over 95% of the population. So we were really looking at the employment-related schemes, and also within the employment-related schemes, because there's also a long-term savings scheme that is available to the whole population and especially informal sector as well. So we were really looking at the employment-based social insurance schemes that include pension, maternity coverage, and employment injury. And there are, whereas the labor law is very clear, saying that formal and informal workers who have an employer, they have to be registered with the Social Security board through their employer. The laws on social protection and social security even talk or specify that no matter the length of the contract or the type of the contract, etc., there's an obligation to cover. But what is not so entirely clear, it's, for example, sales agents who would not have a clear employer-employee relationship, but more like a self-employed relationship working for a company, or even cooperative members. According to the legal framework, there would not be an obligation. But the social security legislation is also talking about everybody who is doing work in exchange of payment should be covered. So that leaves some flexibility for interpreting that in a more broader way, and therefore also covering workers that might not have this typical classic employer-employee relationship with a contract with monthly payments, etc. So I think in that sense, it was really groups of workers that in the general perception would not be considered to be covered. They might have been paying other taxes. So in that sense, they would not be entirely informal. But it was really Social Security extension to groups that previously were not covered. I think the scheme is managed by the Social Security Board. Maybe there is some it's called board, but I think it's actually an institution that is managing all the main or the contributory social security schemes. It's only the social assistance scheme in Rwanda that is under a different institution. And then, of course, you might have private schemes, so like private pensions that might be in addition. But within the public system, RSSB is managing the schemes. So, and then also directly employers are registering with RSSB and also paying the contributions through RSSB. And I think there was the last question, maybe on the scaling up of the initiative. I think it's already from my side, but I will also leave other colleagues to come in on that, because I'm sure they also have views from the social security side, from the employer side, maybe also from GIZ side, who have been, and from the colleagues who have been strongly involved in the workshops. I think for scaling up, it's already making sure that at the small scale where we are sure that the systems are working and that the systems are in place, and especially also that all the legal questions around it are addressed. I think then through the documentation, there can also be more advocacy trying to get other companies on board, other employers on board, maybe also looking at, I think especially for cooperatives, there might be other cooperatives that could be a good example, etc. And then I might slightly disagree with Celine. I think, of course, it's important to show what are the benefits of social protection. But I think also, for example, for the sales agents, if you would want to come towards the universal coverage of that group, I think at a certain point, then the legal framework would also need to be adjusted and be really clear that there might be an obligation. I think also from a point of view of equal treatment of workers, I think if you are in employment, you should be paying a similar rate of taxation and social security contribution than if you are a sales agent, where you also get a regular payment, which might be fluctuating in contrast to other employers. But I think also from that perspective, if there's a legal obligation for a certain part of workers, it should also apply to others. And I think this would also be important in the context of avoiding that there might be fake self-employment, or I think all the questions around non-standard types of work, and how do you make sure that there are also decent working conditions around those.
Thank you very much, Aurélie. Any other colleagues would like to intervene on the questions posed in the chat, or any other colleagues also have a question or feedback to provide in person? Blandine and Régis, do you have any input on the questions?
Thank you. I may maybe compliment Aurélie. I think on the question of the challenges, I think this kind of engagement requires an open mind from both sides. Maybe if I say both, it might sound like two, but it's usually three. So the social security that needs to understand this particular group, the employers that need to understand the benefit of having their employees contributed for, and the employees that feel that this deduction or your participation in this is good for you now, and it's good for you in the future. So that is the challenge. We are used to sitting in office and waiting for everyone to register online and come to us. So it's a challenge for us. It's challenging us to go out of our office and reach out to informal workers and understand them first, and propose some of the solution in a middle point where we can meet within the current regulation. So another challenge is that for some sectors, it will require a lot of time and probably a change of the legal framework, because as Aurélie was saying, and how did we, responding to the question, how did we come up with covering the informal sector? Actually, these are the people that if you meet them on the street, they will not accept that they are employees of someone. They are maybe offering a service that is paid on, on deliverables or on accomplishments. but there is already that relationship. So some of the sectors in the value chain of agro-processing, I think it takes time to understand and to figure out how it can work. So it will not work immediately to all the sectors at the same way. It's not one formula. We might rethink about regularity of the contributions to adjust to the agricultural season, for example. We might think about, also on ourselves, we also think about the risk. Are we collecting sufficient contribution to cover the risk that we are onboarding? So these are the challenges. I can say it's a way of a new way of working that is it requires everyone to open their mind and to keep looking for solutions that are adequate for each of the sector. I submit.
Thank you very much. Aurélie, can I ask you again, because you've presented the prototypes, maybe to answer Tom's, some of the questions posed actually online in terms of which specific schemes were implemented within the prototypes, as opposed to, you know, the general 9 branches of Social Security. So specifically for Rwanda, which schemes were targeted specifically? Over to you.
So it was quite clear from the beginning that we would have to work within the existing schemes because, as Julia mentioned, it's a prototype, it's kind of a short duration. So if you have to develop a new scheme, you are in it for the next 2 to 3 years. So within Rwanda, you have within the contributory schemes, you have the health insurance, of course, that is through CBHI, but then also through the medical scheme for the formal and the public and the private sector, and commercial insurance. But you also, and then you have the long-term savings scheme available to the whole population with a focus also on informal economy, but which is based on individuals signing up. So there's not this employer relationship. And also it, as a long-term savings scheme, of course, it provides less protection than the existing schemes, contributory schemes that are mostly interpreted as being for the formal sector, that provide pension, employment injury, and maternity. And so there was really the decision to be ambitious and to really try to link it to formalization, and therefore really focus on the extension of those contributory schemes. The other contingencies, so family benefits, and unemployment insurance are not yet part of the social security system in Rwanda. And as we were a prototype, we had to focus on the existing ones.
Thank you. Would any of the colleagues, maybe Blandine or Régis, have an answer to the split between the employer and the beneficiaries in terms of the contributions? Or Aurélie? I think this is the regular...
5.3% for the employer, 3.3% for the employee.
Thank you. I see some additional questions being asked. Anyone would like to come in person with their questions? I see there's a question on the first prototypes with the farmers, the specific challenges. Aurélie, I know we've discussed quite a bit the challenge with maternity benefits. If you'd like to, sorry for calling you on you again, but if you'd like to, because I'm not sure we have colleagues who have worked on from the enterprise level on this specifically. Would you like to comment on the challenges there and the opportunities possibly, as well as Régis?
I think I can start, but of course I speak under the control of the national authorities. I think challenges were around specifically on the prototype, the challenges were around the definition of a workplace, which is especially important because there's an unemployment injury benefit. So, and the employment injury benefit would be more beneficial or more generous than also a disability benefit that would be available under the pension scheme, for example. And therefore, it would be important to be able to make the differentiation between an employment injury and a normal injury that would be happening. There might also be, I think it's something we would still either see in the implementation of the prototype, or also, I think, see looking at existing data, if there would be really a moral hazard around declaring too many employment injuries. But also for the farmers, given that they would have it was dairy farmers, so they would have the cows within their house for most of them. So therefore, it would also be difficult to define when are they working, when they are not working. For sales agents, that would already be easier. So I think that's one of the challenges. And then another point, but I think it's less of a challenge, but the taxation that applies to agricultural income is different than what would apply to income from from employment. And so there it would also need to be clarified which one would apply, or also in the case of the agricultural workers, making sure that the exemptions which are more generous for agricultural income would still apply even if they are registering under Social Security. I think maybe last point, but Régis had already hinted at that. It's like the seasonality in agriculture is also a challenge, because of course you would have seasonality, so you might have contributions that are not every month, but currently the eligibility criteria for pension, for example, is based on how many months have been contributed. And so this would then also mean that there can be discrimination or less favorable treatment for farmers or agricultural employees, and that therefore there needs to be some more, I think, conceptual clarification probably around it, and really making sure that all the members have a fair treatment or an equal treatment. But I saw that Régis had his hand up, so over to you.
I lowered my hand. I think you covered it all. Thank you.
Very much. I think we've exhausted our time for today. I don't know if there are any last burning questions, or if Valeska, Sarah, or Julia, you have some final comments from your side. Colleagues, please feel free to come in if you'd like to, if you have any final questions or final comments or interest in expanding to your respective countries.
Rim, if I may, one message, maybe to look
please.
also at the more replicability for other countries, and to get back to one important point that Aurélie also shared, because looking at prototypes and looking at specific initiative in enterprises, it may indeed give the impression that the registration to social insurance is more on a voluntary basis, and which enterprises are ready or not to register. And really clarify very well that, in fact, if the objective is to reach social protection for enterprises and our workers, it's important to put in place a legal framework that is mandatory for all, and also in terms of respecting a fair competition between the different enterprises. And that is indeed the good practice to have this mandatory framework. We've seen in countries where they attempted to extend coverage through voluntary schemes that the results were very limited. And even though the mandatory extension is a vision and it takes time, and the prototypes that we've heard today are good examples of how we can turn this mandatory into a reality. It still remains the option and the vision for achieving this coverage for all enterprises and workers. And then, as it was the case through the project, to see concretely how this can be done in a way that it also supports the enterprises to continue growing and improving also their business. Yeah, thanks. That was a last word. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Céline. GIZ colleagues, any last words before we close the webinar for today?
Yes, yeah, if I may. But
you go first, Julia.
Right. I just wanted, first of all, to thank ILO for the organization of this webinar, and then maybe one remark regarding the scaling, because that was raised as a topic. And first of all, I think this project leaves us very hopeful and very positive and optimistic, because it's an example of if you put willing and the right people at the table, that actually a lot is possible. And I think we've also seen that there is a job for all of us to do for the scaling and the rollout, each of us in our own mandate and in our own logic that we're working in, be it in the official systems, be it in the communicative job, in making sure that we do a lot of outreach with what has been done in this project, and also detecting opportunities to apply this learning in other contexts, be it in other sectors or other areas in the Rwandan context, but also in other countries that might have a similar setup in some sectors, but that might be very different. In the end, it will always be about very context-specific solutions, but I think we've seen how a group of people from very different backgrounds and perspectives have worked together to make something possible in reality in a very short period of time. And I think that was really great to see, and I'm very grateful to have been part of this. Over to you, Valeska.
I think you covered it all. Just last hint to those who are joining today, also from GIZ side, maybe working in the same area, encouragement to, if you're interested in replicating this approach or getting advice on more details of how we've done this, we're very happy to also give advice and hand over experience documents, whatever is needed. So feel free to approach us. Yes, and thank you again to the ILO colleagues for making this event today possible and for collecting all the perspectives here. I think it was hopefully very insightful for all participants.
Thank you very much, Valeska. Thank you, colleagues, for attending and for staying with us until the end of this webinar. This was a very useful exchange of experiences, and we look forward to continued collaboration on this. And with that, have a good afternoon, everyone, and see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.